Today I am here with our Head of Investigations, Phil, and we are going to be talking about some official documents we have received from the New Zealand government that show that they are actively working to censor speech here in New Zealand. They're actively censoring us and multiple other groups. So to give you a little bit of background for anyone who doesn't know what Operation People is, my name is Chantelle Baker, and after the Parliament protests where I live streamed every day, I saw a huge decrease in reach for my own Facebook page, and it led to it being closed by Facebook earlier this year. Since then, we've launched our media company, Operation People, which you're now watching, and we have also found that this page has been heavily reduced. From these documents, we can now see that the government has been discussing Operation People and myself and working with Facebook to have our page silenced. Here is one extract from some of these emails about Operation People and myself. This is from a man named Daniel Dominy, who's a senior advisor of the Disinformation Assessment and Response Team, and his email is to Sean, who is the head of NetSafe. Hi Sean, thanks for that. In regards to banned actors smurfing back on, in regards to Facebook, there are a few offenders that we know of. So this may be an opportunity to see if we can use the newly created Code of Practice to nudge them along. Perhaps in the same way one uses a rolled up newspaper to nudge a wayward canine along. This is between NetSafe and Dart. And Sean replies, "Hi Daniel, I've had quite a bit of back and forth with the platform on this one in regards to our Facebook page. A little bit frustrating actually. I'll let you know as soon as I have something more concrete." This is proof of what I've been saying for the last 7 months, that the government is silencing people, that private companies don't seem so private anymore. And not only that, but in the same OIA, they have a raft of information and people that they are claiming are disinformation spreaders that they are wanting to monitor and control. A few of these names include the BFD, the Platform, the New Zealand Centre for Political Research, which is a political think tank run by an ex-ACT MP, Guy Hatchard, NZDSOS, VFF, and more. You have been mapping, Phil, over the last few months, the trajectory of how they classify anything as disinformation, who's involved, and what it looks like when it comes to censorship here in New Zealand. What have you found when it comes to mapping out this disinformation assessment unit and all its connections around New Zealand?
I've been using the Official Information Act to retrieve government documents, of which you've got some there. And I've developed this map here, and you can see that it's quite big and complex. It looks at censorship, but it also looks at how information from the government is used to shape public perception as well. So there are two elements to this map, and that's why we're only going to look at a certain part of that today. We can start off with information in the public square. And so that is, the marketplace of ideas. That's information out there that's sort of protected under that free speech legislation. Documents retrieved under the Official Information Act is listed as being leaflets, digital items, web links, and reports from social media. The Official Information Acts detail how this information is collected by CERT New Zealand through public referral, external parties, and there's also some internal monitoring of social media by DART or other government agencies. Now, DART is the Disinformation and Assessment and Response Team. That sits within Ministry of Health, and you can see that here on the map. So DART is really the central piece to this puzzle and how the censorship machine is working. And CERT New Zealand is the first collection agency used to collect some of this reporting. And we have an Official Information Act for the communications between CERT New Zealand and DART. And they have about 2,500 odd entries of disinformation that have been collected over the 2021-2022 period. That information gets passed from CERT New Zealand through to DART. And CERT New Zealand, if we just cover them a wee bit, so CERT New Zealand are involved in cybersecurity, and it is a government organisation. And so they've been passing this information to DART, and then DART is then passing information through to NetSafe. Now, NetSafe is another organisation, and they are again involved with online safety and internet usage.
And so they claim to be independent, don't they? But the question is independent of what? Because they are government funded and they are subject to OIAs under certain areas.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, they do receive some funding from government, and they have a role within government. They are subject to the Official Information Act because they do have an active role within the Harmful Digital Communications Act 2015. Now, from what I can tell, that role is actually more for prohibited information out there, like child pornography and things like that.
Which absolutely should be censored.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's correct. Yeah. And so that's their role, and they are subject to the Official Information Act within that capacity. So they are not necessarily a government organisation per se, but they do have some government functions, and they are subject to that Official Information Act. So if we go back to the map, NetSafe have also established relationships with Facebook, and they have been sending emails through to Facebook in an attempt to have the Operation People Facebook page removed.
So we've got a lot of information here between Dart and NetSafe, where Daniel from Dart and Sean from NetSafe have communicated multiple times about our page and asking Facebook to get it taken down, and frustrated, it seems, from these emails that they haven't been able to get us completely banned. I did find that very interesting, noting that there was such a strong link, and it seemed like it was quite easy for them to communicate with Facebook as well. An OIA was released, I think it was today or yesterday, that did show that the government does have, and the Department of Internal Affairs does have direct access as well to Facebook's internal takedown portal, which means that they can go and log content themselves that they would like taken down, which I found very interesting. And as you mentioned before, with child pornography and these other terrible issues, of course there's some content that does deserve to be taken down, but in the context of what they claim is disinformation, it's incredibly broad. It seems that anything that goes against the government they don't like, they classify now as disinformation. And as we know, disinformation is information given with the intent of causing someone harm. So to try and prove that all of these groups, including us, are saying anything with the intent to cause somebody harm seems like a very far stretch.
I would agree there. And I have worked in sort of that combating child sexual exploitation, so they call that CSE. I've worked in that field. I have done investigations in that work. It is not pretty. And that stuff definitely needs to be censored, and I think we would have unanimous agreement on that. But what we're seeing is our type of content that we're producing is a perspective that is counter to the sort of official government narrative, and I think that's why there is this element of censorship, because what we're doing is we are digging into things like this and really telling a story of, well, what is actually going on, and we are producing the documents to show it, and we're happy to push those links out there so everyone can actually have a look for themselves. Looking
through some of these other links that you have, what are the ones that are the most concerning to you?
Well, we do have documents from the government that show that there is a concerted effort by some private organisations within, and we can see now with some sort of government level of input, to do things such as de-amplification of Facebook posts or pages and temporary bans. There's this particular extract from a government document retrieved under the Official Information Act states Facebook has taken some positive steps to reduce the spread of COVID misinformation using existing tools such as de-amplification, post-deletion and temporary bans through the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet's COVID-19 group, the Department of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of Health, with the Chief Censor and NetSafe. We have established positive working relationships. Now, there's a redacted section in there under sort of privacy concerns to flag issues. We work closely with Facebook to remove harmful content and ensure the visibility of our official COVID communications campaign. So,
how is this not breaching the Bill of Rights and the Human Rights Act? I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, but to me it seems, and I mean, if there are any lawyers that are watching this that think, hey, we could help these guys out, that would be fantastic, because to me it seems very clearly that we have private companies and corporations working directly with governments to silence voices that the government objects to make sure that the government's voice is heard, regardless of what is accurate and what is false.
Yeah, well, it just seems that they are wanting to have a complete control of information out there, and they don't want any view that goes counter to what they're pushing out. They do not want that out in the public marketplace of ideas. So they don't want people to take up any idea that's sort of contrary to their position. To me, that's extremely concerning, because free speech is the fundamental foundation of democracy, and we are working in that space to try and bring a different perspective that we think people deserve to know and we think is interesting, and to see that they are actively trying to censor that when we don't produce anything that is harmful. That to me is extremely concerning.
What are some of the other parts of your map before we wrap up that you'd really like people to understand?
There's some more here where they talk about sort of mainstream social channels are struggling to combat COVID-19 disinformation internationally, and they talk about takedowns.
Even if we go back to the network, I mean, here we can see that DART works with the Medical Council, WorkSafe, other MOH units, Digital Safety Team, the NZ Police, DPMC, which is directly the Prime Minister's office. Are you concerned about the level of influence that this group seems to have, and how people's reputations could be manipulated and damaged by false ideas?
Yeah, for me, it's this is about censoring a certain perspective within New Zealand, and it's a perspective that goes against not the government in general, but this current government. So it goes against this sort of Labour Green sort of policy area. Now, that to me is the most concerning, because how can one government that's in censor any views that are within that other sort of political side? And that to me is why I'm so concerned with democracy in New Zealand, because they are censoring one side. So if they cancel Facebook pages, well then how is the other side going to actually put their arguments against what the current government is doing out there, so that people can choose when they come to vote as to what party they want in?
And it all comes down to informed opinion, doesn't it? If people are not allowed to be informed, then you manage to curate specific opinions and biases and compound those for as long as you want. And I think that's what we're seeing at the moment, is a real compounding of views, compounding of bias, so people get this distorted perspective of what reality actually is. And unfortunately, in this case, it looks like there could be considerable manipulation happening by, as you mentioned, this specific government under Labour here in New Zealand. Our final wrap-up, what can people do? How can we counteract what we're seeing here? What can they do to raise awareness of what's really going on and the level of censorship here in New Zealand?
Well, I think people can take these links, don't take our word for it, like grab these links, have a look and read through these documents and see what is actually happening. That way you're educated from these government documents yourself and you don't have to take our word from it. We'll be publishing more information on this sort of story as more information is revealed, and we have a lot more there as well that we're going to go into very shortly. But definitely take a look at the documents and have a look at what's happening. Talk to your neighbours, inform them, show them the documents, and so there are some other groups as well out there doing some great work, like the Free Speech Union, the Platform. Some of these groups have been labelled disinformation already, but I think that's just because they do. The only threat they pose is a threat to the current government's position within government and their chances of re-election at the next election. That's about the only threat that these groups pose.
Do you think that we're going to see more censorship ahead of the next election to try and convince voters that Labour is the only way forward?
Yeah, I think we are seeing an escalation of and a conflation of terms as well. So we're seeing that the so-called far right being expanded to essentially any idea that runs contrary to this current government. And then we can see here that those ideas are being considered far right or disinformation or misinformation, so that then they can just censor it. It looks like a virtuous attempt or a virtuous action that they're taking, when in fact they're actually subverting democracy, because they're not allowing one side to actually have their say out in that marketplace of ideas. We can't put ideas out there to test for people to consume and think about.
And debate, right?
And
healthy debate,
yeah.
which we all love, which we all need. Healthy debate seems to be lost somewhere amongst the last 3 years of all of our lives. I mean, freedom, healthy debate, the entire thing seems like dirty words now that we're not allowed to say. And that's the really scary thing for New Zealand. Well, Phil, thank you so much. I know we've got a lot to go into in other podcasts and other videos, but I really appreciate your time. And to anyone watching at home, let us know what you think. Read these OIAs, let us know your perspectives, have healthy debate for us about all of this, and let us know if there's other topics that you think we should be researching into, because we think this is concerning and we know that there is more out there to find.